We'll move on to the next item, which is combined Camarillo and Oxnard, and this is a review of the fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget.
Chairs, thank you, Director Freitas. I'm going to break from my norm. You know that I like to keep everything short and to the point, but I think that the budget, you've all seen the budget over the years. There's a lot of numbers, and that's going to come at the end. But I want to start by saying that what I'm about to present in no way detracts from all the work and the commitment the airport is and will be doing for the community regarding noise related issues. But we've heard many times members of the community thinking that they are, a lot of tax dollars are going to keeping these airports running, and it's basically all these tax dollars that do that. But what I'm going to offer tonight is it's not that. And let me run through kind of the big picture. Let's start with the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about is the national plan for the airports across the country, and then kind of work into, where do all these grant dollars come from that we use to improve the two airports, and then hit a economic benefit study that we did about 2019, and then we'll get into the typical budget. So kind of the broad all the way down to the weeds, if you will, in this presentation. So let's kick it off. So the NIPIAS, I think all of you will be surprised maybe to hear that the federal government has a plan for all the airports in the United States. There is a master plan. That's the National Plan of Integrated Airport System, the NIPIAS. And basically they are accounting for all the airports in the United States and how they work together for the national transportation aviation system. That the plan started back in the 1940s and then was upgraded to what we all now know, the NIPIAS, in 1984. All right, let's move on. So there are more than 19,000 airports in the United States. Airports, heliports, seaplane bases, ultralight, glider ports, balloon ports. But only 3,300 of those are recognized as being important in the national system across the United States. And only those in the NIPIAS are eligible for FAA grant, AIP grant funding. Let's go to the next slide. So here's how it's kind of broken down. If you look at the top category, those 3,300 airports, and it basically gets up, the first and the second, the primary and the non-primary. So the primary are the big airports that handle commercial service, and the non-primary are, for the most part, the general aviation airports, and they have rankings again in the primary for commercial service, large, medium, small, non-hub airports, and the GA airports, the critical ones, national, regional, but local, basic, and then unclassified is how they fall out. Let's go to the next slide. So I tried to highlight in the yellow is the top that I think are most important. So large hub airports are airports like LAX or San Diego. Medium airports, you're talking Orange County, an airport of that size, Van Nuys, things like that. But the top line, look at the middle column, the percentage of total enplanements. So those 30 large airports in the United States handle 71% of all the people that are traveling on an airline. So they're moving the bulk of the people. But when you look at the second from right percentage of total operations, they only move 13.3% of the airplanes around the United States. And then you move down to that middle column, the GA airports, national, which Camarillo is ranked as one of the top 92 GA airports in the country, and then Oxnard is one of the regional airports, one of the 482. You combine those two numbers of operations, there's almost 9%, 8.9 and 23.3. they move, those two types of airports move a third of the traffic. And then all of the GA airports move basically 2/3 of the traffic as opposed to the larger commercial size. And why does that matter? Because that's the question that we hear a lot, is, well, you know, we have LAX and we have Burbank, you know, Santa Barbara, if we want to travel somewhere, why do we need these GA airports? Well, that's the key, is that these smaller airports, GA airports, relieve the traffic from those big airports. It would, you know, you all know the traffic on Highway 101. Could you imagine if every morning and every day, all the kids on their skateboards and bikes also were sharing the Highway 101 with you? It would be gridlock every single day, all the time. Well, that's the same with the airports. That's why we have, again, these smaller airports to handle some of the GA type traffic, is to relieve those larger airports. And that's why it's part of the national system, the smaller airports with the big airports, medium-sized airports, things like that, to relieve that traffic. Next slide. So here is all the NIPIAS airports in the lower 48 United States. Those are all the dots, you know, large airports, medium-sized, and then the GA airports across the United States. Next slide kind of shows our area. You know, if you find there to the middle right, you see Oxnard and Camarillo, basically between two, you know, Santa Barbara there to the north, if you will, up the coast. And then we're between, obviously, LAX and Burbank. But there's only a few of those commercial service airports, you know, LAX, Burbank, Ontario, Long Beach, Orange County, all the way down to San Diego. A lot of the smaller airports are there. Again, those are relieving the traffic so that we all can use the system. Want to go catch a commercial flight, those systems are freed up to do the business that they're set up to do, as our smaller airports are set up to do what we do. All right, next slide. So how is this all funded? Again, it's not your federal income tax dollars that are paying for this. It is the Airport and Airway Trust Fund. That is a fund that was developed to pay for the aviation system. You know, more than 90% of it is covered for everything related to the aeronautics system, and its bulk of it comes from you buy a ticket to go on an airline, and 7.5% of that ticket goes to the Aviation Trust Fund. Let's use the next slide. So again, you see in the blue, the bulk of that is your ticket tax. That's the largest percentage of the annually, and at least in 2019, almost $16 billion were collected. Ticket tax, fuel taxes, cargo transportation. You're flying between the United States and a foreign country, there's a tax. Next slide kind of breaks that down, all the percentages. So again, domestic ticket tax, 7.5%. You get a segment tax between two airports. That's, you know, $4.30. Flights between continental U.S., Alaska, Hawaii, there's a fee for that. So all of those, kind of the breakdown of the fees that go into annually the Aviation Trust Fund that pays for improvements at all of the airports that are in the NIPIAS. All right, next slide. So again, Aviation Trust Fund, the bulk of it goes towards grants to help improvements, you know, our runway improvements we did at Oxnard last year, that kind of thing. Same thing that we're looking at improvements to do here at Camarillo. The Part 150 noise studies we're looking to do at both airports, those would be covered in it. But there's facilities and equipment, research, engineering, and then the operations, things like that. All right, next slide. So here is, now we move to the economic impact analysis that we did in 2019. This is probably the most important slide. Again, is our two airports, and you'll see that when we get into the numbers, they're self-sufficient. Between the two airports, we generate enough revenue to do the things we need to do. We get the grant monies for larger capital projects as well. So we do not take any local, state taxes, county taxes, any of that. We are self-sufficient as an enterprise fund. But besides that, there are two economic engines that each year generate, and this is back in 2019, we continue to grow as we build new businesses. You know, Camarillo was $230 million to the local economy. Oxnard by itself, 51 million. 1,700 jobs at Camarillo, 310 at Oxnard. And then we talk about the payrolls. Camarillo, 60 businesses are based there. You'll see that in the next slide, and then 15 at Oxnard. But the key is the very bottom line is that all of that generates tax dollars back to the state, to the city, and local school districts. Camarillo in 2019 was more than almost $11 million a year going back to city, county, school districts. Oxnard was $2.1 million. To give you an idea what's in things like that, obviously the businesses here have sales tax, things like that, there's property taxes, but just an individual tenant of ours that owns one of our small hangars and maybe has like a Cessna 182, they spend about $1,000 a year in taxes to come back to the city, county, schools, to have the privilege of having the airplane here at the airport. So you multiply that by all the airplanes that are based here, and then you take that to the extreme. We've got a few $30 million jets that are based here. You know, that's a 1% tax base. You know, we're talking $300,000 per year for that large jet to be based in this community. So that's the last one of that slide. Do we have any more? So here's a list of the businesses we have: aeronautical business, non-aeronautical businesses. Camarillo has the luxury of not only having aviation facilities, but a fairly large business park. So that's where you see all of the names and types of businesses, both aeronautical and non-aeronautical. We have a few government entities within the county. They do pay going rate to the airport Department of Airports. That's a requirement of the FAA that we collect fair market rent for the facilities that we rent and facility. And then we move to Oxnard. You know, it doesn't have the same size property, a little over 220 acres as opposed to the 650 acres at Camarillo, but still has aeronautical businesses, non-aeronautical, and obviously some government entities there.